Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer. I'm really happy to introduce you to today's guest, Seth Greene. Seth is a nationally recognized direct response marketing expert, and he is the only person in history that Dan Kennedy has nominated for Marketer of the Year 3 years in a row. Seth Greene is the best-selling author of 6 books, including Market Domination for Podcasting. Seth has been featured on CBS Money Watch, CBS News, the LA Times, the Boston Globe, Miami Herald, and other great publications. Mike Koenigs even put him in his launch videos as one of his all-stars. He represents everyone from local bricks and mortar businesses to 4 Fortune 500 companies. Seth is the founder of one of the fastest growing direct marketing response firms in the country, Market Domination LLC, and he's here to talk to us about how to attract new customers like magic. So welcome, Seth Greene. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here and serve your listeners.
I'm really excited to talk to you because your podcast is one of the top-rated podcasts for direct marketing. And I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to create this particular podcast?
I decided I wanted to create the podcast that I wanted to listen to. So I was doing interviews. I was interviewing marketing thought leaders and marketing experts for my fourth book, Cutting Edge Marketing Magic. And I had come up with the idea that I could record the interview, transcribe and edit the interview, and use that as content for my book. And after I had recorded all these interviews, I said, you know what? I've got these great interviews. I could air these as a podcast. There aren't that many podcasts. There are a lot of marketing podcasts, but there are not that many that focus strictly on direct response. And there are not many interviewing these types of people. So if I want to listen to this, I bet you there are other people who do as well. So we launched. I happened to be right, and it took off.
So who are some of your most favorite guests that you've had on your podcast?
Favorite guests: Dan Kennedy, Russell Brunson, Roland Frazier, Sally Hogshead. I interviewed John Lee Dumas yesterday, which will probably air by the time this airs, but hasn't even aired yet. I've interviewed Joel Comm and some other amazing legends in the business, and I pinch myself every day that I get to pick the brains of these amazing people.
I get it, because I'm just thrilled that I get to pick your brain today. What do you think has been the biggest factor in helping you to grow your audience?
Biggest factor, getting our guests to promote that they're on our show, and then social media advertising, both organic reach and, even more importantly, paid advertising to get it in front of more people.
Okay, that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people, when they start creating podcasts, they go the organic route, meaning unpaid promotion. And can you give us a couple ideas about which forms of organic promotions you've used, and then what paid type of advertising has worked the best for you?
Sure. We've used for organic Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And for paid, we've done all of the same thing. And we found we have gotten the most bang for our buck on Facebook and YouTube ads for advertising the podcast.
So when you use YouTube for advertising your podcast, how exactly are you doing that?
So, for example, I will run YouTube ads in front of people watching videos on John Lee Dumas's YouTube channel, and those little video pre-roll ads will advertise that he was on my show and that they should come that his followers and his viewers should come listen to him be interviewed on my show.
Okay, so you're borrowing the clout of superstars
Yes.
within the YouTube universe. That's really, really a phenomenal idea.
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about your content and how you keep your listeners engaged and how you get them to share your podcast so that you can grow your audience, and in that way using your listener base to help grow your audience, or if you do that at all, or if you think it works.
Yes, we do it. Yes, I think it works. How we do it is we will email them and social media post them and ask them to share it, ask them to comment on it, ask them to tell us, hey, what do you want us to, hey, here's John Lee Dumas is going to be next week. What do you want me to ask him? What do you want to know? And who do you want to hear us interview on the show? Stuff like that.
So do your audience members, do they participate a lot when you ask them, what questions do you want to ask? That sounds like a really good idea.
Yes, we get great feedback and some ideas that I otherwise wouldn't have thought of. So I love hearing feedback from them.
That's really good ideas. I was reading about some of the things that you've written about interviews. And like you said that you wanted to create a podcast that you would want to listen to. Do you like to do question and answer interviews or conversational? What is your favorite type of interview to do?
I am a Q&A guy. I come prepared with a list of the questions I want to get answers to, and we go through them, and those will obviously inspire other questions and other tangents, but I come prepared.
Okay. So your best tip is when you're doing a podcast, become prepared with a list of questions, but be willing to be a little bit flexible and go off if you hear something that sparks a real question initially.
Absolutely.
So how do you find the guests for your show? You named off some pretty big names. Were they hard to get to come on your show?
You'd be surprised, because sometimes people who are some of the most successful are also the most generous. So, and once you can always use your guests to leverage up. We ask our guests who else we should interview, who else they know that we should put on the show. We ask our guests to help promote it, and then we will use. So, for example, if I say, hey, would you like to appear on my podcast alongside Dan Kennedy? If that's someone that, let's say another guest looks up to, then they'll say, sure, I'd love to. If Dan did the show, it must be good. So we sort of use that to spiral up to the point where I could get John Lee Dumas to do my show, whereas, even 6 months ago, he probably would have said no.
So the more you do the podcast, how many shows do you have at this time, by the way?
Ooh, that's a good question. I do not know. I off the top of my head, I think I've got probably close, if not 200, pretty close. And
how long has the show been on the air?
How long? Less than a year.
Wow. So you are your shows like daily or weekly, or how often do you have the shows? I know a lot of people think they have to do a daily show.
You don't. And then most markets aren't necessarily as competitive as the internet marketing space. I started out airing once a week, and then we had so many people who wanted to do the show that I had to start airing every day. Otherwise, I was going to have to tell people, your episode's not going to air for 4 months, and they would have forgotten about me. So I started out airing every week, and then we got inundated, so I started airing every day. But you don't have to. Most of the clients that we produce their podcasts for through our Done For You service, we tell them to do it once a week.
So once a week. And since you mentioned the Done For You service, can you talk a little bit more about what that service involves?
Absolutely. So we will completely do all of the work for you. Everything from the research and marketing to booking the guests to cover art, audio introduction, producing and editing the audio, scripting the interviews, managing the submission and SEO process to iTunes. We'll even transcribe every episode and turn it into a book for you and publish the book and market the book. And you can get a free copy of my new book, Market Domination for Podcasting, along with a live training session where I show you exactly how we built our podcast and how you can copy us at ultimatemarketingmagician.com.
Oh, okay. ultimatemarketingmagician.com. I want to ask you a little bit more. We live in such a fast-moving world, and like you said, the competition for marketing podcasts is probably very fierce. So besides having the best guests that you can find, how do you keep up on all the trends and topics so that you can have an intelligent conversation with these people?
I am a voracious learner. I am always reading something, watching something, buying something. I am a junkie for marketing courses and products and have storage units full of them and am constantly trying to figure out what's coming next, who I should be listening to, who I should be learning from so that we stay on the cutting edge.
So of all the people that you have read books from, who would you say would be your top 3 favorite authors or people you've learned from?
Dan Kennedy, every single book by Dan, although my favorite is No BS Marketing to the Affluent.com Secrets by Russell Brunson, and then 80/20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. And I would say number 4 would be The $4 Sandwich by Dr. Corey Malnikoff.
Okay, the $4 Sandwich, I'm not familiar with that book, but I'm definitely going to
get it. It's phenomenal.
Look at all of those. I do have another question along the same lines. I want to know, what apps would you like? Do you have like 3 apps that would be useful to use if I were creating a podcast?
Sure. There's more than 3, but sure. Call Recorder works great for recording an interview over the phone with decent quality audio. I would say, what else do we use? Obviously, the iTunes podcast app itself for subscribing and listening. And what else do we use? For when we do video, iMovie works great. Anchor also works great for short, in between episode comments or rants. I would say those would be my favorites.
Ooh, I've not heard of Anchor. That sounds like something that it would be fun. So what would you say it has been your biggest challenge with creating your podcast and keeping it going since it's been going for more than a year?
Biggest challenge when creating it? I'm a really fast implementer, so I'm big on just getting stuff done. So I would say I probably didn't spend enough time in the beginning on the audio quality of my podcast. So, I mean, it still isn't the best audio quality, but I think my first 20 or 30 episodes, I didn't even have an introduction. It was just, we went straight into the interview. There was no professionally produced intro. So if I could go back in time, I would have done a more professionally produced podcast sooner, but nobody complained because the content was good. One of my most listened to episodes of all time is my interview with Dan Kennedy. And because of the phone that he was calling in from, that audio quality is terrible. Like, it cuts in and out, but it's Dan Kennedy and the content's so good that it got that many people to listen to it. So I would say that would have been my biggest challenge starting out. And keeping it going, I don't have any issues with that because my issue is keeping up, because we have so many folks who want to do the show that, again, we're still airing every day at this point, and getting enough time in the day to do the interviews, and then have my staff edit them and get them out. There are some times that I miss a day or two in a week, but I would say keeping up with demand, which is a good problem to have.
So you have a team of people, obviously, now that you're helping other people create podcasts. You have a team that works on your podcast and other people's podcasts. About how many people are on your team?
About 14 as of the time we're recording this.
Wow. So you've got quite a crew. So if you were advising a podcast newbie, someone like me, since I consider myself a podcast newbie, what would you say would be the 3 biggest things that you've learned that you wish you knew before you started, so that give us that 20/20 hindsight that's going to shave time off of our learning curve and off of our frustration curve?
That's a great question. Okay. What I wish I knew. So start sooner. I'm kicking myself because I've seen the impact it has had on our business to have a show. I've seen the impact it's had on our clients' businesses to produce their shows for them. I wish we had done it sooner because it would have helped our business sooner and it would have helped all those people that we're helping sooner. So I would say start sooner. Don't wait. It's funny. I'm a member of my mastermind group who's also a very dear friend, has been quote unquote talking about starting his podcast. His podcast is, I believe, finally getting started next month, but he's been talking about it for months and months and months. And he's trying to get all of his ducks in a row. Like he's watching every video in Podcasters Paradise first. He's doing all of this other research. And I didn't do any of that, for better or worse. I just started. So I would say a good plan today that gets executed is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. So start sooner. I would say don't worry about strategic planning. So I had a client in my mastermind group today ask me, he's a political consultant, and he was asking me, you told me I should be shooting video every day on my phone about what's going on in the election. But I get caught up in thinking about the strategy and the long term. What is my theme going to be and how is this going to progress over the months? And I said, don't worry about any of that. Just go on Google News, find something stupid that Trump or Hillary said today and talk about how you could have prevented them from that. And that's why people need to hire you. And there's your 2-minute video for the day. So get started sooner because your marketplace is waiting for you. If what you do helps people, then you've got a moral obligation to help as many of them as you can, as fast as you can. So get out there yesterday. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't worry about all the details. I figured those out later. Still haven't figured them all out, but still managed to have what I think is a good show with a good following. And I love the part, like when I walk into, my kids joke that I'm marketing famous. I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old as we're recording this. And they joke that Daddy can still go to Starbucks, but if Daddy goes to a marketing conference, it's so cool. Like I pinch myself because people come up to me and go, oh, I love the episode you did with so-and-so. Or, oh, I think it's so cute that you have your daughter doing your commercial on your podcast. And I'm like, wow, all those listeners are real people. So get out there yesterday so you can reach those real people who need your help.
I think everything you just said is really, really good advice. I also wanted to ask you about the other uses for your podcast content. And I know that you also recommend to people that they turn their podcast content into books, which you've done. I'm not sure if every single one of your books was the results of a podcast turned into a book or what, but how does that process work and why do you recommend it?
I have turned 4 of my books into four of my 6 books are from interviews, and books 7 and 8 are from interviews. Why we repurpose our content to books, blog posts, and social media posts. And why I recommend it is because it's easier. The distance between your brain and your mouth is a lot shorter than your brain and your hand. It is much easier to talk your book or talk your content than it is to write it. So I would highly suggest that if you're thinking, hey, I need all this content, I need social media posts, I need a blog, I'm supposed to be doing video. Do a video interview, take the audio, make it your podcast, put the video on YouTube, transcribe it, turn it into a blog post, then turn it into a social media content, then turn it into a chapter in your book, and you do 10 or 20 interviews and your next book is done.
Wow, that is phenomenal. So I wanted to ask you another question about the podcast world, because as we speak, it's growing. And I don't know what the statistics are, but I do know that pretty soon all the new cars are going to have iTunes. So it just seems to me like it's really smart if you're going to do a podcast, like you said, do it yesterday, start, take that imperfect action. What podcasts do you really enjoy listening to? And just share that with us. I'd really appreciate it. And they don't need to be marketing podcasts, but in general, what podcasts would you think would be really worth listening to?
Absolutely. I love listening to podcasts. So some of my favorites, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, John Lee Dumas, of course, Russell Brunson, Marketing in Your Car, Push Button Influence, Alex Mandossian, Steve Olsher, Reinvention Radio. Those would probably be some of my top 5.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds like a good list, and I'm sure that if everybody tuned in to listen to those plus your show, they would certainly have a really good marketing knowledge. Like you said, when you read a lot and you listen to these educational type podcasts instead of the top 40, which a lot of people are doing now. They're not listening to radio. They're listening to the podcasts of choice in the car or while they're exercising or taking a walk or something. So I definitely think that podcast marketing is coming of age. And speaking about the marketing part of a podcast, of all the different direct response marketing that you have done, and since you are the 3-time nominee for the top marketer of the year, what do you think podcasting is one of the top ways that you can do direct response marketing?
Yes, I think it is. You got to think of it as a parallel to traditional radio. So for example, we have a number of financial advisors who work with us, and they use traditional radio shows to drive attendance to their physical seminars. So podcasting could do the same thing if you're podcasting to a local market. If your market, like ours, is national, then we're driving people to opt in for a free copy of our new book at ultimatemarketingmagician.com, or we're driving them to attend a webinar or get a free video series to get them into our world, into our funnel, so that we can ultimately help them do something. So podcasting is a great way to do that. You've obviously got to have, in order to make it direct response, you've got to have a clear call to action. You've got to have a deadline, and it's got to be trackable so that you know those leads are coming from your podcast and not somewhere else.
Okay, so that's really good advice. And just in general, no matter what marketing you're doing, you want to be able to track it. Because if you don't know where anything's coming from, how are you going to know what works?
That's the beauty of direct response.
Yeah. So tell me again, where can we find out more information about you?
ultimatemarketingmagician.com.
Okay. And since I've heard that, I'm not going to end the interview quite yet, because I want to ask you one more question before you leave. ultimatemarketingmagician.com. Why is it called the Ultimate Marketing Magician?
Because how I got into magic was through marketing. I am one of my hobbies is I am a professional magician, and the way I originally started learning marketing was I bought a Marketing for Magicians course by Dave D back when he was still serving that market many, many years ago, and it worked so well. Dave D was the one who introduced me to Dan Kennedy in the first place.
Okay, great. So, Seth Greene, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to explain the podcast marketing and all about how you think about podcast marketing. I learned so much from you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.